Welcome to the Member Engagement Show, the podcast for association professionals, brought to you by Higher Logic. I'm your host, Kelly Whelan, and in each episode, we'll talk to guests whose expertise will help you gain new members, boost retention, and deepen member involvement, all goals that can transform your organization. I invite you to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode, and visit us at higherlogic.com/podcasts to catch the best of past episodes. Now, let's start the show. Welcome back to the Member Engagement Show. Today, I've invited Andrew Hohman on the show. Andrew has worked with countless customers, helping them implement and launch their communities. And today, he's going to share his expertise around identifying and addressing project risks and helping associations make their communities successful. So welcome on the show, Andrew. Can you tell listeners a bit about yourself and your background?
I'm so happy to be here, Kelly. I've been working with Higher Logic for just over 5 years now. Before that, I was in the hospitality space. So always looking to bring people together, give good experiences, provided a better transition than I expected into Higher Logic. But with Higher Logic, I've worked in strategic services and more customer success and post-launch capacity, but I'm also working for the last few years now on the implementation side of things. So helping customers get their communities up and running, launching, and off and running.
Awesome. Well, I'm so glad to have you on today. I think we can kind of dive into some of the things that makes online communities successful, or the things that can kind of serve as a stopgap for people. So as we talk about the whole process, kind of before, during, and after community launch, I wondered if, to start us out, you could share what you think overall separates successful online communities from ones that struggle.
I think the thing that organizations can have in their control to make sure that they're successful is ownership. Own what you're doing with this online community. Own what it means for your members, and then also make sure that somebody does own it. Make sure that this isn't something that everybody's just giving 10% of their time to. Somebody should be the clear owner of this.
It's kind of like it's somebody's focus area where if you don't have someone who is dedicated to it, you kind of run into this space where everyone and no one owns it. And then there's things that fall through the cracks because it's not someone's primary thing that they're thinking about.
Exactly. And this doesn't need to be 100% of somebody's responsibilities, but it needs to be something that is a dedicated focus for somebody, especially through implementation. Once the community's launched, once you've expanded the use of community, it's definitely not going to be owned fully by one person. There's going to be other people involved in it. And that's where I kind of come back to own this as an organization, own the mission of what you're looking to do with online community. I think a few other things is just having future vision, not doing one thing and ending there. We're going to talk about, even though we're talking about launch, we're going to be talking about post-launch a lot and the growth that can come with that. So another thing is not just putting this out there for one thing, seeing where else it can go.
Yeah, I think that's important because it's the balance of, like you started with, there has to be someone who's kind of like baby at the organization is community. But that doesn't mean that other people aren't contributing. Like, you absolutely should be bringing in other departments and thinking about ways that the community connects across all of the different things that your organization does, because that, if you treat it that way, then your members start treating it that way, where they start seeing it as, hey, this is a hub for where I find the upcoming events, or where I learn more about certification, or where I can ask people a question. And the more that the organization thinks about it that way, like, hey, how can community help support the initiatives that we are doing anyway, the more that members will feel that and be able to kind of get this sense of, oh, I go to the community if I want something. Taking it back to like before you launch the community, are there any things that you would say are like foundational decisions that associations should consider as they kind of get into that implementation and launch phase?
Yes, I think it's defining the scope, at least the starting scope. We've talked around this a little bit already, but community, we talk about the open forum, that being one of the starting points for a lot of organizations and a starting point for the member experience. They want to come and they want to learn from their colleagues, from their peers. Yes, that's a great starting point. Figure out what else is good to incorporate into the community experience early. And that has to do with two things. One is how your members engage. So that may be, our committees really need a good operational space, or we have a student program that is really high engaging and it would be great to offer them a community. And the other way to think about it is looking at how our organization is operating, looking at our calendar as we work towards launch. What does it make sense to not incorporate into the community, but incorporate the community into? So I mentioned committee operations being one of those things. Maybe you have an annual conference coming up, and that brings up an opportunity of let's have a conference attendee community be one of the first communities that we launch with. Yes, the heart of this is online community, but this is Higher Logic's member engagement show. This is a place where members engage in general. So it's about that peer-to-peer engagement, but it's also about how this is incorporated into the experience as a whole.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I feel like it kind of comes back to, I think when Georgina was on the show, we talked a little bit about how community should, obviously you're looking for those metrics of success for the community itself, but the online community isn't like totally your end goal. Your end goal is supporting your members. So you want to use it to do that. And as such, there's ways to kind of make sure that when you do have, like, if you're running a committee, then maybe the community helps you keep conversations all in one place. And then on the other side of it, like you said, if you're having a conference, maybe you talk about the community there because that's going to get more people there so that if they want to continue conversations that happened at the conference long term or ask follow-up questions or discuss something they learned in more depth, they can go to the community and do that. I will say from my experience, sometimes like we struggled with that, like tying the community to actual outcomes that we were trying to have as opposed to just seeing it as another thing to manage. For me, when I've seen our customers who are like more successful than we might have been with community, it kind of comes from that place of they have a clear sense of what they want the community to do for their members and the ways that it functions within other programs versus kind of just seeing it as, oh, I have to check off this thing.
Right. And that's especially hard during implementation because during implementation and in the early days of a community, there is a little bit more of that. We have things that we need to check off. It is a little bit of a thing to manage,
Mm-hmm.
but that aspect of it is going to decrease over time once you build momentum in the community. So that's where the other thing thinking about early on, you think about your scope, you think about who your early adopters are, who you're going to be doing testing with. So one thing talking about committees as an example here, but also this could be chapters, this could be special interest groups, is if people are going to be running those smaller communities, make sure that they are getting in there first. Make sure that you are enabling them so that they can lead those communities. We use the term beta testing a lot, and yes, we want to go in and make sure everything works. A nice side effect of that is you're getting people acclimated with it and you're getting their buy-in of it. So that's something as well that sometimes the decision is rushed of who to bring in. And it's like, okay, let's bring in the membership committee and our board members and great. And that's perfectly fine. But if we have the opportunity, let's bring in some other members who are going to be those early adopters for us. And when we launch the open forum, our all member community, they're going to be starting conversations. That's something as well where in a great world, we get those early adopters in, we get them bought in, and they can help us build momentum because once you get momentum going in communities, then it's not a thing to manage. It is a thing to drive forward. And it is something that you can then look into more and say, okay, how can we get more benefit out of this? How can our members get more benefit out of this? Early on, it is a little bit of a thing to manage, just getting it set up. But the goal, of course, is that that's not the approach to it long term.
It's like when we talk about kind of like seed content and people and starting some of those conversations so that someone can see this is what it looks like to engage in this space. And I think that's once you start that and do that, make the effort of starting that, people will take it from there. Like your members will take it from there and they'll build on that. Even if you want to have like a content calendar, and I do think that's really worth doing. Like I'm a planner. So I'm very much a person who's always like, okay, yes, we're planning for this, the current implementation or the current process, but then I also like to kind of look forward at what do we need to do long term. So my mind also goes to some of the parts where it would be like, okay, how often are we going to post just to keep momentum going? What are some of the topics we can bring up if we see conversations lagging or something? Like I know for our organization, there were obviously some of the topics that were a little more tactical around what people actually had to do for their jobs that they were coming to ask questions. And then there were also things where we were trying to build like rapport and that actual sense of community because it's an online community. It should feel like a community. It should feel like, hey, people can come here and have serious conversations, but they can also have relationship building conversations. So sometimes we also had a backstock of like, what are some prompts we could run that would just get people talking if it's a little slow, or what are some fun things? We also used to think about like, well, what do we do throughout the year that we'll want to make sure we have something scheduled for the community? Like, do we have an annual conference? Do we have webinars that we know happen at a certain time? Do we have in our space, like volunteer month was, and I know for the association space that's true too, but I used to work for a nonprofit. So like volunteer month was also a thing we wanted to make sure we were talking about around that time. So having those things kind of marked down as, hey, what could we do in the community around this? I think helps too, in addition to, like you said, getting those early adopters in the door, getting people starting to have those conversations on their own and sparking their peers to have to do the same.
Oh, I was just going to say, you really nailed it. We didn't talk about this before, but a few weeks ago, I was talking with two of our strategic advisors, and I asked them, what are the one or two things that more customers need to be doing, like through launch? So through launch being up until launch and first, 30 to 60 days afterwards. And their clear answer was seed content and a content calendar.
Mhm.
Those are the two things that not every organization puts together. We don't have a large like content calendar working session as a part of implementation, but it's an important thing to do. Seed content, like you said, it's having a little bit of a backstock of conversation starters from your members, so many of which are posted in the first few weeks to help build that momentum. But in that time, you keep a few around so that you can insert them if that momentum starts to lag a little bit. And then a content calendar. And thinking about launch, let's think about the first 30 to 60 days. What's going on in the organization? What are those prompts that we can throw in? Those are two things that if you get to day 2, day 3 of the launch, and there isn't as much engagement as you expected, you have stuff prepared to bring into the community experience and keep members going with it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so much easier. I mean, I think about that even from if you're an organization that has done like a social media strategy, I think some of what you learn from social media comes in for the online community too. Like it's obviously a lot easier to make a post that you're supposed to or do a post if you need to spark some engagement. If you have a plan of kind of, hey, these are some things I could post anytime. These are some things that are related, very time specific. I think that helps a lot. Jumping off what you said about launch, though, I wonder, are there some specific things that either you recommend or that you've seen associations be really successful with when it comes to building that initial excitement and momentum around the community launch itself? Like, hey, we have this new community. What do you guys think?
I think for one, it's being intentional with the timing. We've talked about, calendars and how that can sometimes determine launch date or determine launch opportunities, especially around major events. So that's something where you do not have to align your community launch with your annual conference or with another major event. But if it works out, great. And that doesn't mean necessarily that you launch the community at the conference. It might mean that you demo the community at the conference and you have people sign up to be beta testers, to be those early adopters. It might mean that you launch it right afterwards and say, hey, after this conference, we are launching our online community. with this conference attendee community where you can begin engaging. I think the other thing is being intentional, aligning it with your brand, aligning it with your industry's culture. That's something that we talk about through what you name your open forum. It might be the all member community. I'll give a little shout out to one of my customers who works in the hospitality industry, and their all member community was named the lobby because it's a bunch of hotel professionals. So it was perfect because it wasn't just here's this open forum. Everybody in that industry knows what a lobby is and gets it. And same thing with the introduction post, that welcome post. Yeah, have a welcome post, have people introduce themselves, see if you can incorporate something into it that fits with the member experience, fits with the time of year as well. Those can be great fun conversations to help build rapport and show that the member community, yes, it is a great place to ask tactical questions and questions for career growth and development, but also to get to know your peers and learn more about them as people and connect with them. Moving past launch date, another great thing to have planned in the first week or so of the community is some form of positive reinforcement. Your members know that this is a big thing that you're doing. And if they don't, you can help them understand that this is a big change to the member experience and their member benefits. A great thing that I've seen done is within the first 30 days, providing positive reinforcement. And it can be to everybody who has posted multiple times. It can be to everybody who asked a question. It can even be to people that logged in. Showing that little bit of appreciation, showing that positive reinforcement is something that people appreciate. You can use this through things like ribbons and badges. You can even send them an email to thank them for engaging. Like, thank you for logging in. You can send it to all of your members saying thank you for being a part of the first 30 days of this new online community. That's something that we don't always think about is positive reinforcement. We think about what's next, but also positively reinforce what's happened in those early days.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I feel like when people have asked, like, I think some of the questions I see come up around the idea of sort of gamification, because I feel like in part that's what you're describing, that sort of like gamified process of recognition points for people. I have heard some people say, our community is all adults. Do they need to be like recognized? And like the answer is yes. I mean, why do you think every app I have on my phone for like learning something, like my fitness app, my like habit tracking app, all of them have little like, oh, you get a little badge or whatever because you did that. And I'm not going to lie, like that triggers me to go in because I'm like, oh, if I lose my streak, then I lose my streak. And it's not that big of a deal, but it is a little bit of a thing where you have that little bit of feeling of, oh man, I don't really want to lose my little streak. The other thing I feel like sometimes people have asked is kind of, oh, well, will we be contacting them too much then? And I think that's where I feel like I remind people, well, you're not asking them to do much when you recognize them. Like even if you send an email, they will see it and it will register with them, and then that's it. They can move on. It's not like, oh, they're getting this thing that's going to distract them or just cause a problem. It's like they get that little recognition. Maybe it sparks them to say, oh, I should log in again today and see what's going on in the community. And if it doesn't, like that's okay too. It's at least given them that kind of triggered maybe a little bit of serotonin where they feel like rewarded, and also they've thought of the community again. And I think it's so important in the beginning to start making that the community a habit, because if it doesn't become a habit, people won't turn to it for things. So I do feel like, especially at the beginning, those little things that reinforce, hey, remember this thing exists and you should check it on a regular basis because there's stuff happening here, makes a difference.
That's why the content calendar and the seed content are so important. I always say the core habit, the baseline habit of community engagement is receiving those digest emails and reading them. And that's why also when organizations say our members complain about receiving too many emails, we don't want to auto subscribe our community to, say, a daily digest type of email, and they want it to be opt-in. You're just fighting such a large uphill battle. There are going to be people who unsubscribe. There are going to be people who complain about getting too many emails. Now, granted, you understand your members. better than I do. You've been working with them for a lot longer than I do, but generally speaking, it is worth it to auto subscribe them so that they can develop that base habit and also follow up with how to unsubscribe. Don't be afraid to do that. I know that, in our email marketing side of things, we really came around on, and this I think was a trend across the industry of saying, hey, we're going to unsubscribe you because you haven't done anything with us in 6 months. And then guess what? People get interested. But also, I want to know how to unsubscribe. I want to know how to opt out of things. So when there's that concern, I say on day 3, include a post or send a separate email about, hey, here's how you update your subscriptions. They don't have to go digging for it. It's not that hard for them to find, but they don't have to go digging for it. Tell them how to do it, and then you've done your part. You didn't just opt them into something and say good luck. You opted them in, but showed them how they can adjust it if they want.
I really love that you brought that up because I feel like that goes back to a lot of the data I see. So for listeners who've tuned in before, you probably know that I work on HireLogic's Association Community Benchmark Report and Association Email Benchmark Report. And a lot of what I see in that data, first of all, in the Community Benchmark Report, the Community Digest emails outperform basically everything else. They have a super high open rate compared to the general average open rate because people like to hear from their peers. Like when they're getting that Community Digest, I don't think they think of it as the same thing as a marketing email. So even those people who complain about getting too many emails, a lot of times I feel like people feeling like they get too many emails is because they feel like they're being sold something. Those digest emails often are not like that. It's very much like, hey, this conversation happened. You might be interested in it. If you're not, also, you just like move on. But I really love that you also called out the importance of that transparency around, well, how do you adjust your communication preferences if you do want to change what you're getting? Because I think too often in my own work in the marketing space, people get a little worried because they're following the numbers of the metrics and not necessarily thinking about why those numbers matter. I think a lot of marketers in particular will kind of be in this space of, oh, well, I don't want to see subscriber count go down, or I don't want to see open and click rate go down. And I'm always someone who's like, if someone doesn't want to get the emails from us, let them unsubscribe. Like I want them to leave. If they don't want these emails, I want them to unsubscribe because I don't want to be annoying them. I only want to be sending messages to people who actually want them in whatever cadence I can control and give it to them that they want. So I think pairing that auto subscription with the opportunity to point out to people, hey, this is how you tell us if you don't want this as often or whatever, is so important because it's reinforcing trust in the community. It's also like reminding people, hey, we're trying to look out for you. We want to give you something that's useful. If you're not finding this useful, you can go ahead and unsubscribe and you don't have to get this anymore.
Like you said, it shows that transparency and that trust early on in the community experience.
I know we've been kind of talking about prepping for launch. Is there anything that we haven't talked about related to kind of some of the most important things to focus on during that launch itself?
So I think right before that launch itself, so I would consider this part of the launch. A lot of times we do this 1 or 2 days before the launch, is do a virtual walkthrough of the site. Importantly, not logged in as an admin. Look at the site as a logged out user. Does it make sense for a logged out user? And a lot of times we're thinking about that as a non-member or somebody who doesn't have an account yet. Are they seeing the right things? Are they being directed to the right things? Then log in as a non-member account. Does everything make sense there? Is something being shown to them telling them that this is primarily, if not completely, a member-only platform and they should join so that they can engage? Then log in as a member. And this is where it's less checklist. And let's take a step back for a second. If I am random member who has minimal engagement with the organization and I walk into the site, do I know where to go? Does the navigation make sense? I don't know what an online community is. Do I know what to do when I get there? Thankfully, a lot of that is going to be similar to other social media platforms that they have already. But do they understand that there is this community that is an all member community. And then there's this other community that I can join if I want to around this special interest or area of specialization. Does the user journey make sense? Can they find their way? I remember when we launched our new Thrive model a couple years ago and organizations were upgrading to Thrive. I worked with a lot of those organizations and we revisited a lot of things with their community setup along the way. And there were a couple times where the way that users went and discovered communities was a list of all the communities and they could join which one, but there were 30 communities on there and it wasn't very clear of where to go. And so what we ended up doing was kind of revisiting that. We split that up into a couple different pages to help the navigation be easier and also set up an email to be sent to those users 2 weeks after they join the organization saying, hey, you are already a part of this community. Here are the other types of communities you can go join if you want. So do that final walkthrough beforehand to make sure, hey, does this make sense? And this is also why it's a great reason to bring in testers that maybe are not your board members or are not heavily involved committee members to make sure that it's a space that makes sense for everyone. Getting into the actual launch itself, those first few days, you're going to be checking in a lot. You're going to be looking and seeing what's going on in the community. Are people logging in? Are people posting? And you want to make sure that you can start to build that momentum. That's really the key at that point. We can grow from wherever we launch at. That's a big part of this. We can grow from there. As long as we get a little bit of traction early on, we're going to be okay.
I really like that you called out taking that step back because I do think usually prepping for something like this, like you're in it for a while. You're looking at, it's like when I draft one of Hierologic's reports, like if I've been looking at those 60 pages for a month, like I might need to take a step back to see, hey, is anything not standing out to me right now because I've been looking at this so long? So I think it's really important to take that moment to, at least within your organization, but hopefully with some testers, check and make sure, did we get this right? Or is there anything odd here? And then I wonder, like, when you are going from the launch into kind of keeping that momentum going, is there anything you would suggest for doing that so that you don't kind of end up with a ghost town or kind of end up with the community losing traction?
Yes. So we've talked about content calendar, and that definitely plays into this as well. One thing that I didn't say when we were talking about those decisions that you make early on, and especially the scope of what you want to launch with, make sure that that scope isn't too big. Make sure that it's small to medium. It's maybe your all member community plus one collection of communities, whether that be committees or special interest groups, or an all member community and a conference attendee community and this other community. Start with something that is a little bit more manageable. And I think it's perfectly good to have a plan of, we are going to launch these communities, and then 3 weeks later, we are going to launch these communities, because it gives a little injection of energy to continue to launch communities, to continue to expand. So I think that's one thing, is have that second wave planned, whether it's for 2 weeks afterwards or 6 weeks afterwards. I think the other thing is, once you launch, then more clicks. Yes, you've spent a ton of time in this community and you've spent time in other communities through implementation. But once you launch and once you see your members engaging in it, things will click and you'll go, oh, our members really like this. Maybe this will make sense for them. And I think the other thing that I will get into with that is figuring out where community needs to be incorporated in your wider operation. Easy example, your new member welcome email. Make sure community is in there, because chances are, once they become a member, they are going to be added and auto-subscribed to an all-member community, and they're going to start receiving digest emails. They need to know what those are. They need to know what this community is. So make sure that community is incorporated into that welcome campaign, whether it's the first email, second, maybe third. Member newsletter. Can and how should community be incorporated into it? We don't need a here's the community corner in every newsletter, although a lot of organizations do that. I've had organizations that have, on a monthly basis, taken their most popular discussion thread, and turned it into like a mini article and was like, hey, so and so asked this question, and these people chimed in, and they came into this solution, and it was great.
Jumping in here just because
Go.
one of our most successful community and content like pair ups was we did something
Mm.
like that. So then we started doing it more regularly, and it was sort of pulling a really popular conversation from the community, getting permission, obviously, from the people on the thread to see if they were okay with us sharing that, and then posting it to our blog because we allowed both members and non-members into the community. So sometimes if someone wasn't as familiar with the organization and they hadn't created an account for the community yet, them seeing that blog post or something sparked them to be like, oh, wait a minute, I'm missing out on these conversations that are happening in the community. And it was always a very well trafficked blog post because it was so tied to things that people were already talking about. And it was always, we would see like a jump in community subscribers because people would find the blog who weren't in the community yet. And they'd be like, oh, I'm missing this. I want to join.
That's great. I love that. And the other place this starts to go comes back to what we were talking about at the beginning with ownership. And through implementation, especially, this is somebody's baby. And the community should still have an owner. But this is where you start to have a better grasp of what a community platform can do, what all the other functionalities that you haven't even tapped into yet can do, and think, oh, how does that incorporate with our events team? How does that incorporate with our chapter operations team? They may be coming to you, or you may be going on a little internal roadshow to them and saying, hey, when you have this coming up, do you want to use this in community for it? Would this be helpful for that? Starting to see where this can branch out across the member experience. That is something that you're going to do endlessly. I talk with a lot of my customers in my last implementation call. I like getting in a rhythm of adding something and enhancing something. Add and then enhance. Add a new community, and then the next month or the next quarter, revisit the home pages of the individual communities. And how can we build that out more so that they can get to the things that they want to get to? And then come back and let's add a gamification program. And then let's come back and let's enhance the all member community by revisiting the content calendar for it. So don't leave it static because you can go so far with it. But the more you put into it, it's momentum. The great thing about that is hopefully you get to a point a few months in where you have other things going on. You're very busy and you can still put a little bit of effort into the community, but you don't have to drive it.
Everything we've said today, I think, is reinforcing that it starts to build its own momentum. And that doesn't mean that you wouldn't kind of still pedal now and then. It's like a bike.
Yes.
Like you pedal the bike up the hill, the bike starts going down the hill and you have some momentum, but you might like pedal or steer it a little bit now and then, even though you have that momentum. It just strikes me that you also have all these tools now, I mean, in modern community platforms where you can automate things. So you might realize, hey, we have a lull at this time of year. Maybe we'll set up an automation rule to kind of ping someone ping people a reminder if they haven't logged in a while. Or you might kind of automate some of the gamification things that you're doing. You might automate some of the, and frankly, Higher Logic Thrive community, if you have Higher Logic Thrive community and marketing, there's a tool now called Smart Campaigns that helps people do that really nicely. So a lot of community platforms have things like that built in to help you so that it's not like here we are saying like you're making this, you might have to make some effort, but sometimes that effort is like a plan and then automating it as
Yeah.
opposed to you manually having to send an email.
Well, and something like taking the most popular thread and summarizing it in a blog post was done with some great manual work back when I saw an organization doing this 5 years ago. Now AI tools can help with that and take 5 minutes and go back and edit it. Don't just publish the AI thing without
Yeah.
editing it. But these things can be a lot easier. And I think the other thing that we've lightly gotten at here is the more mature your community gets, the more you'll be able to listen to it and
Yes.
take things away from it that can either go back into community or into other things. You know, seeing what the most popular library entry was last month. I worked with a very mature community And their second most popular library entry one month was a library entry that had been posted 3 years ago. And they were like, wow, this is random. Our members are suddenly interested in this topic. Also, is that 3 year old resource still accurate? And they turned that around into lightly touching up the resource and then promoting it because all of a sudden their members were interested in this due to some sort of legislation that was happening. But these things happen in the association space.
I'm so glad that you mentioned this because I think this is one of my favorite things about community. And granted, I'm a content marketer, so not shocking that I find that super interesting. But I just think sometimes having time set aside, obviously, we're doing like performance measurement, we're doing like efforts to make sure the community is driving engagement. But I also think sometimes as someone working with associations, just like looking at what you can learn from your members through whatever data you have. And in this case, it's like community discussions or most popular community, most popular resource in the library. Like it sparks new thinking. It sparks things that you might be able to do with your organization. You might see that there's a thread where people have a ton of questions about something and it gives you an idea for a webinar. You might see, like you said, your example is perfect. Oh, people are referring back to this piece of content and we actually haven't looked at it in a while. Now at least we have a priority to update this versus like looking at an entire list of content and saying, what should we work on first? You can actually see some of these things might be most valuable. I think you can also take a look at things that like aren't performing and ask yourself why. Like, is it because people don't need this anymore? Or is it because we haven't promoted it? Or is it because it needs to be a different format or something? Like, there's just so much. If you approach your community with curiosity, and again, especially if someone has dedicated time for the community, I think someone going in there just with an eye for like, what could I learn from the community today can spark so many conversations in your organization. And I think especially if you do it cross-functionally, that's amazing because I know for our community, like sometimes our program staff, they were doing like 16 webinars a year. They had more than one a month. Like you run out of ideas sometimes. Like none of us worked in that field. We
Yeah.
were just trying to support that field. Sometimes we get ideas from like the board and stuff like that. But sometimes you're trying to think of a webinar topic and you're like, what do I do? I mean, I've done it at Higher Logic. I wanted to submit a session proposal. You can ask people too, I guess is the other,
Yes.
like now I'm getting excited about it. You can ask, like if you're not seeing something, but you want to know, like ask your members in the community.
Right.
I asked Higher Logic user group, like, hey, would you guys be interested in a session topic at MMCNT about SEO? And some people said yes. And some people were like, I'd love to present with you. Now I've got co-present. Like, so there's just I feel like the opportunities there are kind of endless and you decide where you want to put the effort based on what you're seeing.
You're absolutely right there. And that's where, like, with this content calendar, that first month, yeah, it's a lot of org generated stuff. It's a lot of, okay, what do we want to put in? And then, like you said, it's listening to them. And that organization with the 3 year old resource that was very popular, the reason they looked at that was because once a month they did a featured resource. And a lot of times they took inspiration from what was popular in the community. So what is happening in the community, that can feed the content calendar, that can feed your content in the future. And that's one way that community can help things be more efficient. And it's so funny because we came here to talk about launch and we talked about so much more, but it's because launch is the starting point. Launch has its job. It is to get it up and running. It is to get it in front of your members and a whole bunch of other things. But launch has its purpose. And then what you are doing with your community changes after those first couple months. I'm reading Project Hail Mary right now, and I'm just picturing, I don't know the parts of a rocket well, but like when a spaceship blasts off, like the rocket blasters at the bottom, they fall off because its job is to get you up to the edge of Earth's atmosphere. And then it falls off, and then the rocket keeps going. I'm that rocket blaster in implementation. I get you off the ground. I get all that hard, heavy lifting at the beginning done, and then I'm going to pull my weight off and you're going to keep going. But it can grow into so much, and across your organization, across your member experience, we talk about so much because launch is the first domino with all of that.
Ah, I love that analogy. And I feel like too, like one of the reasons it's helpful to kind of think of where it can go, even though you should be careful not to like bite off more than you can chew,
Yes.
is because that can drive what you decide to do in launch too, like what you decide to include or not at the beginning, because you know those are your primary starting goals. So it makes sense to me that we went we went beyond launch in our conversations.
As somebody who used to work with organizations post launch, who only works with them in implementation now, when I tell my customers in our last implementation call, like, I'm never too far away and I'm excited to see what you do, it's genuine because I used to work with organizations who had launched for 3 years. So all these conversations that we're having right now, I have a lot of them with my customers. I don't have all these conversations with any of my customers, but it's something that they're going to go and do on their own. And they're going to have those conversations among themselves or with other members of their higher logic team. But I don't always get to be a part of those.
Yeah. I'm sure it's like, I mean, it's like me. I miss, like, obviously, I still support associations in a way through what I do with Higher Logic, but I will always like miss some of the direct efforts that I would have in the association space. This has been super interesting to chat with you about, and I'm wondering if there's anything, like, kind of as we're wrapping up, if there's anything you feel like we didn't cover or any last thoughts that you would want to leave listeners with.
I think I'll just hit a few that I find particularly important. I'd say one, define your scope. Make sure it's not too big because you're going to have a second wave. You're going to keep growing, but figure out the first few things that would be helpful. Plan out from your launch, get some seed content, have a little bit of a content calendar planned, and then positive reinforcement right after launch. Do those three things and keep growing from there. But like we said, launch is just the starting point. And also, I'll say a lot of what we've done today doesn't have to apply to just launch. You can randomly start giving positive reinforcement at any time. So all of these things can be done to reinvigorate communities, help launch additional communities. So while we've talked about launch, much of what we've talked about, and in the end, everything we've talked about doesn't just apply to launch.
I feel like too, you learn as you go. So you see like what works, and then you probably, I don't know, even during this conversation, we talk about things and I write a little note. Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Like we talked about something I wrote down to do content on later. So like that's kind of what you're doing in your community too. You do these things at the beginning, and then they're going to make you think of other things. It's going to make you think of, oh, this worked really well with my members. I wonder if we did it this way, or we use that to talk about this, if that would work. So 100% agree. And I really appreciate you coming on the show to walk through all of this.
So glad I came on.